very pleased today on behalf of the entire team at Reachability to be interviewing someone who has had a crucial role in not only the growth of National Accessibility Week, but in fact, the entire ACA movement. The ACA, or the Accessible Canada Act, is one of the most important pieces of legislation ever to occur for persons with disabilities in this country. And I'm so pleased and honored to have the opportunity to interview the Honourable Carla Qualtrough. I would first like to tell you a little bit about Carla, because Carla Qualtrough is not only a member of Parliament for Delta, British Columbia, she's in fact been a cabinet minister since she was very first elected in 2015. First serving as Minister of Sport and Persons with Disabilities, and then as Minister of Public Services and Procurement and Minister of Accessibility. She currently serves in the senior role of Minister of Employment, Workforce Development, and Disability Inclusion. She is active, on a number of cabinet committees and has been at the center of the federal response to the COVID-19 pandemic. She is responsible for many emergency measures, including the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, or CERB, the Canada Emergency Students Benefit, Employment Insurance, and the one-time payment for persons with disabilities. So as Canada works to recover from the effects of this pandemic, Minister Qualtrough is leading the charge on creating jobs, upskilling workers, and implementing a historic disability inclusion action plan. Now, prior to entering politics, Minister Qualtrough practiced human rights law at the provincial and federal levels and was a vice chair with the Workmen's Compensation Appeals Tribunal. She also has an impressive background in sport, and I'm looking forward to asking her about it, having competed for Team Canada in the sport of swimming, and she has won a number of world championship and Paralympic medals. She has volunteered extensively at local, national, and even international levels, always focusing on inclusion and equal access for all. She's been inducted into the Canadian Paralympic Hall of Fame and further has been recognized as one of Canada's most influential women in sports on more than one occasion. Minister Qualtrough has been legally blind since birth and is a passionate advocate for the rights of persons with disabilities. She led the creation of the Accessible Canada Act and is internationally recognized for her work in disability inclusion. She's received a number of awards for her advocacy, including the Disabled Women's Network of Canada, the Canadian National Institute of the Blind, the British Columbia Aboriginal Network on Disability Society, the Ability Center, and the International Paralympic Committee. She is also a recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal, something I'm proud to have in common with her. Minister Qualtrough lives in Ladner with her husband, Aaron, her two youngest children, and her mother. I'm so excited to introduce and have a chat with Minister Carla Qualtrough. Thank you so much. Minister Qualtrough, Tova Sherman here from Reachability.
Hi there. Can you see me?
Oh, I can. And more importantly, can you hear and see me?
I sure can.
Oh, thank you so much. As you can see, mine is not a fake background. It would be so much prettier, but we are so grateful for your time, knowing how busy you really are. I've just completed telling everyone doing your intro, and just the amount of things you're doing reminds me of what Margaret Mead says. Yeah, it takes a few.
Like, you want to talk to accessibility and the Accessible Canada Act, you're always going to get me saying yes. So it's,
Thank you. And I did want to acknowledge that I adore your entire team. Deputy Minister LaRoche and I have had the opportunity to speak on a number of panels together, and I'm just so impressed with your entire team. I just wanted to say that. So thank you. I won't waste too much of your time because you have none. So Minister Qualtrough, if I may, can you start us off by telling us about your involvement in the Accessible Canada Act, or as we call it, the ACA?
Well, thank you for the question. I'm so proud of the ACA, the work that was done, for decades. And disability rights advocates had been calling for some kind of federal law that would require a certain standard of accessibility in all areas of federal jurisdiction. So, the part that I've played in this is just a small part in the long history of advocacy and rights advocates never accepting anything but full inclusion for Canadians with disabilities. So listen, I was a human rights lawyer before I went into politics, and when I got the opportunity to run, and I got the opportunity from the leader of the Liberal Party, who's now our Prime Minister, to run on a platform that included putting into place what we then called the Canadians with Disabilities Act, which became the Accessible Canada Act. I jumped at it. I had been really frustrated in my work in the human rights system by having to wait until people were discriminated against before we could help them, because that's what the system is. It's quite reactive, and wanted to put in place a system that proactively identified barriers, that somehow eliminated the discrimination before it happened. So I was so excited to be appointed the first ever minister responsible for persons with disabilities, which, you know, the name change is a whole other conversation we could have. I subsequently became the Minister of Accessibility, and now I'm the Minister of Disability Inclusion. But what I really wanted to do with the ACA was make sure it belonged to the disability community. So we conducted a massive national consultation, the most accessible and inclusive consultation in our country's history on any topic. We had more than 6,000 Canadians and 100 organizations participate, from Iqaluit and Yellowknife and Nova Scotia and everywhere in between. It was so exciting. It was an ASL, LSQ, Indigenous Sign Language, you know, CART, open captioning, whatever people needed to participate directly, they got it. And it was a really exciting, it was an exciting time for disability rights in our country. And then, you know, I basically said, okay, gang, what should we put in this law? And the responses that came back was much more fulsome than let's set up a system where we create standards and we remove barriers. It was, let's make sure we have an organization to monitor the UNCRPD, which we did. Let's make sure we recognize sign language as the first language of Canadians who are deaf, which we did. So we put a lot of little goodies in that law that goes beyond the kind of dream of having some kind of standards organization. And I think it's the most important advancement in disability rights since the Charter.
I'm exploding with 50,000 things because you excite me so much, because as a disability advocate, I'm one of those people that was out there waiting for this. And so I'm so excited.
Like you made it possible for people like me to have the job I have today, right? I'm well aware of what it took within our movement to give me, a person with a disability, the opportunity to sit at the cabinet table. And I take it really seriously.
Well, as a person with disability as well, and you'll probably figure out I'm on the ADHD spectrum, but that's okay. I'm doing great. But what I really wanted to say is, you know, when you read things like Not For Us, Without Us, which is, of course, very much the theme, you can hear it, but is it so? And then you look at the leadership, and I always say the fish stinks from the head. It could be because I'm a maritimer. But I look and I see you, and I see this distinguished person who has literally committed to community from day one, and I know it's authentic. And then I look at Deputy Minister, and I see the authenticity of Not For Us, Without Us. I see that commitment from the top down, and it means everything to people like me. So on that note as well, I really want to acknowledge and thank you for that.
Well, thank you. We've gone one step further. So I grew up in a world of disability language that it was the nothing about us without us. And we've actually now gone beyond that. And we're just saying nothing without us, because everything is about us. There isn't a law or a decision or a program or a service that in my case, the government of Canada puts into place that doesn't impact citizens with disabilities. So it's not just enough that somebody else decide if this is going to impact us, because everything impacts us. So we've really truncated that to nothing without us. And that's really what I, tried to get into the ACA, was this framework of, at least 50% of the board of Accessible Standards Canada has to be persons with disabilities with lived experience. And we cannot do standards without consulting the community. And it's infiltrating. Like, I can tell you there's a lot going on across the government, and I can give you 10 examples of where 5 years ago they wouldn't have thought, or it might have been an afterthought, but now it's kind of infiltrated into the way we make decisions.
One of the things I've actually learned and started focusing on from some of the verbiage coming, especially from some of the deputy minister directives as well in this department, and that is the idea of not just talking about hiring, but talking about promoting. And we
Absolutely.
sometimes forget, and the stats are equally bad around both inclusion and promotion due to bias. And I really think it's so neat that that's come out, because it wasn't something I was thinking about. Now I've been able to add that to the discussions I'm having across Canada. So thank you
It's
for that as
also
well.
retention, right? So it's hiring, it's retention, it's promotion, it's incentivizing people to stay by making their employment, their work experience meaningful and kind of hopeful. That's the word I think of when I think of it. But it's also making sure that people can see a path to leadership for themselves. And that's by having people like Deputy Minister Laroche be in her job, and people can see themselves. It's really important to see yourself.
I'm always hearing that also from people on the ADHD spectrum, that they just are, so you can do something, like you can achieve this stuff. You can pull it together. And I'm like, I'm here to tell you it can be done. Now I have to switch gears a little, because I was really excited to find out that you were an award-winning Paralympian. And I wanted to know, and first of all, reminding everyone I said earlier, but it's in swimming. And I wondered, has that rubbed off on your kids at all?
Well, it's interesting you say that. So I'm a sport junkie, particular amateur sport. I've been involved in sport. I spoke sport my entire life. And my kids are not necessarily very sporting, but they are quite competitive. My daughter in particular has every bit of competitiveness and drive that I had in swimming. She has it in dance. She's 10 and she dances about 14 hours a week. Wow. And just loves the idea of being excellent at something, whatever that something is. And for her, it's dance and performing. Beautiful. And very committed to being better than she was last week and being better next week than she is today. And I've it's been hard because I'm super competitive. So I didn't want to, force my children to be a certain way that they're naturally not. But I wanted to make sure they had the opportunities to figure out what they are and who they are, right? So, but what I always say to my kids is excellence is a transferable skill. And, working hard at something, whether you come in first or last place, that's not what I care about. I really care that my kids work hard and that they're good people. And if by the time they leave the nest, we've achieved that, then I've done my job.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate it. I'm a big rugby player, so I was just, yeah. So I love the sports, I have to tell you. So that when I heard about I know I wasn't going to mention it. Rugby. I did want to kind of go do a little fan thing for your husband, but I didn't want to get to go on that road. I want to get back on track because I really appreciate that the ACA, if no one has figured this out yet, is the ultimate in win-win-win. Right. That's something I live by, that there's 3 wins in what we do. And if we find that third win, no one loses ever. And so inclusion is the perfect win-win-win example, because by including that person with disability, everybody benefits, whether that's through creativity, whether that's through the person getting the job, or the employer realizing the power of diversity in the workplace. Yeah. So I'm really excited about that. And I wanted to know, because we have so little time left, if you have a message for Canadians about really staying resilient, continuing to be resilient, and in these challenging times where it's hard to see all the wins in everyday life.
What my message would be, well, first of all, what we need right now in Canada is people who are innovative and creative and loyal and hardworking. And you'll always find those traits in Canadians with disabilities. So we need you. We were all born as people with disabilities into a world that wasn't built with our needs in mind, into a world that wasn't built or designed for us. And all of our lives, we've had to be innovative and creative and problem solvers. And so those are the things we need most in the Canadian labor market right now, in our leadership. And so I think, be confident in what you bring to the table, because we need what you bring to the table, and we are figuring it out. I am very proud of how disability inclusive our pandemic response was. And I know that it's because of all the hard work we put into the Accessible Canada Act and the kind of cultural awareness around disability inclusion that we were sowing at the time, and how important it's been in our pandemic response. And you only have to look at how very quickly and historically, when the pandemic hit, we started offering ASL and LSQ at all the prime ministers' announcements and daily. Remember when he kept coming out and doing the daily messages? We always had some ASL and LSQ. That then turned into every time a minister made an announcement, we have ASL and LSQ. That turned into all of our public health announcements are an ASL. Now that's just the way we're doing business. A year and a half, we didn't have that. And so that's a direct result of the work we've done in the ACA, getting through the pandemic and the legacy coming out of it. But, you know, we are all in this together. Resilience is a common trait of those of us with disabilities, and it's going to serve us well in these challenging times. And we're adaptable. We think outside the box because the box doesn't always fit. And so we're pretty comfortable figuring out different ways of doing things. And Canada needs that right now. So you are, as a person with a disability, almost by definition, you're what we need. So when we're realizing that, and we're not going to stop until we see not only the rights we've entrenched in law, so the Charter, the human rights, and even the ACA, but fundamentally that the systems that are underneath those rights really, that we get rid of the discrimination and bias and everything that still still exists, because then we can fully realize those rights.
We as a disability community will be looking back at history, and what we're going to see, Minister, is this was the crucial moment where disability stopped being in the medical paradigm and truly tipped over into a social, or as I like to call it, a human rights paradigm. And I truly believe as we look back, Minister, it's going to be you we see at the head of that drive. And I want to, again, on behalf of the Reachability team, who are working really hard for this community, and they look and they see themselves also reflected in the work you do and who you are. And I want to thank you again for your time today. And there's no better way to welcome National Accessibility Week than to have the Honourable Minister Carla Qualtrough with us. So thank you again.
Well, my pleasure. And I'll end with saying that it is in fact the ACA that we legislated National Accessibility Week. So it's all in there, and there's so much more work to do and more to come. And I'll keep your eye on what we're about to do, because it's going to be big.
Believe me, I am, and many of us are. So again, all the best, and go get those things done. We don't want to keep you any longer.
Thank you. Take care. Be safe.
Bye now.